Hi everyone! Today we'll be sewing a toy sword and shield that's perfect for all your little ones. We'll be using my pattern that you can get at samismaking.com or using the QR code on the screen. Okay, let's get started. This pattern comes with two front shield options. Today I'll be making option 1, but if you choose option 2, you can follow along when I start assembling the straps. One tip I highly recommend is labeling the wrong side of your pattern pieces. I use painter's tape to label each piece, which makes it easier to tell which piece is what and what direction it goes in, and what side is the right and wrong side. We'll start by placing the two bottom shield pieces on top of one another with the right sides together. Clip or pin along the perimeter. We'll take this to the sewing machine and sew along this edge using a straight stitch with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Your sewing machine will most likely have markings on the needle plate that show you where to place your fabric to achieve the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. For this tutorial, all of my straight stitches will be shown in black and my overcast stitches will be shown in red. However, you should use your thread color that closely matches at least one of your chosen fabrics. Next, we're going to join the two top shield pieces together. Place them on top of one another with the right sides together and clip or pin along the side seam. Once again, we'll take this to the sewing machine and stitch the side seam using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. For the next steps, I'll be using an overcast foot. An overcast foot allows you to finish the raw edges of your fabric using an overcast stitch, helping to prevent the fabric from fraying. If you don't have an overcast foot, you can also use a zigzag stitch or a serger. I'm going to use an overcast stitch to finish the raw edges of the joined top shield side seam and the joined bottom shield side seam. If you're interested in the overcast foot I'm using, I've linked it in the description. Now we're going to connect all of our front shield pieces together. Open the joined top shield pieces and joined bottom shield pieces so that they're laying flat with the right sides facing up. Place the joined top pieces on top of the bottom piece, lining up the edges. Clip or pin the side seams together. Once everything is lined up, sew the pieces together using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. After sewing, finish the raw edge using an overcast stitch, zigzag stitch, or a serger. Now that the front of your shield is completely assembled, take it over to your ironing board and give it a good press. Ironing your seams as you go helps your finished project look much cleaner and more professional. And if you're sewing option 1 like I am, this is what your finished shield front will look like. Now we're going to make the shield straps. Take your strap pattern pieces and fold each one in half hot dog style, with the right sides of the fabric together and the wrong sides facing out. Pin or clip along the raw edge. Using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, sew along this edge, creating an open-ended tube. Repeat this process for the second strap. Once both straps are sewn, finish the raw edge of each strap using an overcast stitch, zigzag stitch, or your serger. Because we're going to turn these straps right side out, if you added labels like I did, make sure to remove it before continuing. I turned one strap inside out already so you can see the difference, but we'll turn the second one together. There are several tools and methods you can use to turn your straps, including a loop turner or even a bobby pin. I'm going to use a safety pin. I'm attaching a safety pin to one end of the strap and feeding it through the inside of the strap until it comes out on the other end, pulling the fabric right side out as I go. We're going to repeat this with the second strap. Now head over to your ironing board. We want the seam of the strap positioned towards the back so it is hidden once the strap is attached to the shield. Press the seam into place and then iron the entire strap flat. There is a difference between a strap that has been ironed and one that hasn't. Once both straps are pressed, they should look something like this. Before sewing the straps onto the back of the shield, I like to mark their placement. The strap placement markings will be placed on the right side of the back shield pattern piece. I like to use the paper pattern as a reference to measure the distance and placement, then transfer those measurements onto my fabric. Now we're ready to attach the straps. Place the back of the strap with the seams facing you. Fold the front of the strap backwards so that approximately 1 inch of the strap is folded over. Pin the folded section in place, making sure you're catching both layers of the folded strap and positioning it over the marking on the back of the shield. We're going to repeat this for both ends of both straps. When sewing the straps, I wanted my stitches to sit close to the edge, so I used the markings on my presser foot as a guide. This gave me approximately 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, but you can adjust it slightly as needed. The important thing here is that we're sewing close to the edge of the strap and we're making sure that the strap is securely attached. To secure each end of the strap, sew a rectangle approximately 2 centimeters by 3 centimeters. We're essentially sewing around the section of the strap that we folded over. If you chose option 1 like I did, lay your front shield piece down with the right sides facing up. You'll notice that some of the back shield fabric extends past the top and bottom points in the vertical center of the shield. Trim the excess so that the wrong side and the right side of the front shield piece match. If you chose option 2, you can just skip this step. From this point onwards, the steps are the same for both options. Lay your back shield piece flat with the right sides facing up. Place the front shield piece on top with the right sides facing down so the right side of both pieces are together. Clip or pin around the entire perimeter of the shield. We're going to leave approximately a 3-inch opening at the bottom. Once everything is pinned, take it to your sewing machine and we're going to stitch around the perimeter using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Just remember not to sew across the 3-inch opening that we're leaving. Once you're finished sewing, it should look something like this. Before finishing the raw edges, we're going to trim some of the excess seam allowance around the 3 top points of the shield. Be very careful not to cut through your stitches when doing this. Removing some of this excess fabric will help the points look sharper when we turn our shield right sides out. Now we're going to finish the raw edges. Once again, I'll be using my overcast foot and an overcast stitch, but you can also use a zigzag stitch or your serger. Remember to leave the 3-inch opening unfinished. Once you're done, your shield should look something like this. Before we turned the shield right side out, if you added labels to your pattern pieces like I did, now is the time to remove them. Now we're going to turn the shield right side out. The points can be tricky, so take your time. I'm using my fingers to help push the points out, but you can also use a blunt tool if you need some extra help. As tempting as it might be to use something sharp, I don't recommend it. It's very easy to accidentally poke a hole through your fabric. Once you've turned everything right side out and pushed out the points, your shield should look something like this. We're almost done our shield, guys. Now it's time for stuffing. So here is not the time to be skimpy with your stuffing. We want the shield to have enough structure to hold its shape. I like to use my fingers to work the stuffing into the points and the edges around my shield. This step is basically a combination of adding stuffing and adjusting where the stuffing sits. Once you're happy with the amount of stuffing, your shield should look something like this. Now it's time to hand sew the opening closed. The fabric might naturally want to fold inward along the seam, which can be used as a guide. Pin the folded edges in place to make them easier to sew. Thread your needle using a thread color that matches the fabric we're closing. I'll be using black thread so that you can clearly see what I'm doing. To start, make an anchor stitch by inserting the needle into the inside of the shield underneath one side of the folded edge and bringing the needle out through the fabric. From there, pick up a small amount of fabric from one side of the folded edge, then pick up a small amount from the other side. We're going to continue alternating from side to side. As you sew, you'll see a little ladder of stitches forming. Every so often, gently pull the thread tight. This will pull the two sides together, closing the opening and hiding the stitches. We're going to continue this until we reach the other end of the opening, and we're going to secure our stitches with a knot. Once you're finished, your shield should look something like this. Congratulations, we have officially finished our shield. We're halfway there, and personally, I find the sword comes together so much faster. Start by laying one of the sword handle pattern pieces flat with the right side facing up. Place one of the blade pattern pieces on top of the handle, matching the flat bottom edge of the blade with the flat top edge of the sword. We're going to clip or pin these together. When you first pin them, you may notice that some of the bottom edge of the blade extends past the handle, and that's totally okay. Just make sure that the blade is lined up evenly with the handle. Now we're going to repeat this with the second handle and blade pattern pieces. Now that both pieces are pinned, we're going to straight stitch them together using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once they're sewn, finish the raw edges of both the blade and handle seams using an overcast stitch, zigzag stitch, or your serger. Where we attach the blade and handle, you'll notice two areas where there is some extra fabric extending beyond the handle. We're going to carefully trim the excess fabric so the blade lines up with the handle, and we're going to repeat this with the other joined sword pieces. If you labeled your pattern pieces like I did, now it's time to remove all of the labels from the sword pieces. Lay one of the joined sword pieces flat with the right sides facing up. Place the other joined sword piece on top with the right sides facing down so that the right sides face each other. We're going to clip or pin the whole perimeter, making sure to leave a 3-inch opening along the side of the handle. We're now going to sew around the perimeter using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure not to sew the opening. Please don't be intimidated by the curves and the points of this project. I know it looks intimidating, especially if you're a beginner, but the one thing I like to do when sewing them is breaking it down into smaller sections instead of just sewing it continuously. I think it's so much easier. When looking at the pattern pieces I already sewn together, you can kind of see where I've done this because the intersections create an X. Before finishing the raw edges, we're going to trim some of the excess fabric around the points. Again, be careful not to cut through your stitches. Once you're finished trimming, it should look something like this. Now we're going to finish the raw edges around the perimeter, making sure to avoid the 3-inch opening we left. Once you're finished, it should look something like this. Now we're going to use the opening we created to turn the sword right side out. Just like the shield, we gotta be patient with this step. I really like using my fingers to help turn up the points. I also like to take my time and work the fabric through the opening gradually. Once you turned the entire sword right side out, it should look something like this. Guys, now it is time to stuff it. We are almost there. We want the sword to hold its shape, so once again, do not be shy with the amount of stuffing you use. Take your time adjusting the stuffing as you go so that everything is evenly filled. Once you're happy with the shape and the amount of stuffing, it should look something like this. Now we're going to close the opening using the same ladder stitch we used with the shield. So we're going to fold the raw edges of the opening inwards towards the inside of the sword and pin them in place. We're going to thread our needle with the same color that matches the fabric. We're going to start with an anchor stitch once again underneath one side of the folded edge. Then pick up a small amount of fabric from one side of the opening, followed by a small amount from the other side. We're going to keep alternating between the two sides to create a ladder of stitches. Every so often, we're going to gently pull the thread tight to bring the two sides of the opening together and hide the stitches and close the gap. Once you reach the other end, secure the thread with a knot. Your sword should look something like this. Congratulations, guys, you officially finished your sword and shield by Sam is Making. I hope you had so much fun making it, and I would absolutely love to see what you create.